everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope you're doing fantastic. We had an amazing class last week, our first class, and I'm really excited to be moving into our week 2 content, and that we're doing this through a video cast. What I want to do. So last week we talked about the syllabus and the expectations for the class, and if I were you, I would have had a lot of questions about what does this mean for me, this term, this like how am I going to get through all this. Some of you are familiar with research, others of you may not be as familiar with research. And so this week, what I want to do is I just want to connect some dots for us. I want us to think about how we use a scholar practitioner approach to research in organizations. So what does that look like? What kind of problems do I look at? What kind of questions can I have? What are the things that I can kind of dig into around research? What am I curious about? How do I connect the dots on that stuff? So we're gonna pull in. Last week I asked you to read Dr. Catherine Lombardozzi's article on smart practice. We're gonna pull some of that in and talk about that idea of unrelentingness, right? We're gonna pull in both of the texts for our class, the Swanson-Holton text. We're going to talk about research and kind of digging into that a little bit. So what I've got a couple of slides that I want to walk us through, okay? And that are going to get us to think about and focus on, well, what is my hat? How do I, again, connect those dots, okay? So I got a couple of slides, and then we're going to come back at the end, and we're just going to kind of tie a bow on it and wrap it all up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and switch over and get digging into some content for this week. All right, everybody. So let's go ahead and get started with this idea of understanding research methods in organizations. So we're going to contextualize this, as I mentioned, for our class, but also within the broader field of human resources and organization development. So our objectives for today are this: to introduce the idea of research and then connect that research specifically to the hat. Okay, so we're going to be trying to do those two things, and I'm going to do them in kind of a brief period of time so that we can get to everything we need to get to within this particular video cast. So without further ado, the question that we should be kind of centered our ideas on is, what is this idea of research? So what is research? And if we were in class tonight thinking about this, or today thinking about this, we would be in small groups kind of asking this question: what is research? And so if you're at home watching this, or maybe you're at the grocery store in the checkout line watching this, or in the airport security line watching this podcast, I want you to think for a minute. All right, when I hear the word research, what comes to mind? Now, for some of you, you say things like, oh, yuck, or oh, that's terrible, or I don't understand it, or complex, or you think numbers. In this class, we're going to demystify and kind of pull back the onion layers around the idea of research. Well, if we dig into our field a little bit, the field of human resources and organization development, research is this. According to our text, the Swanson-Holton text, research is an orderly investigative process for the purpose of creating new knowledge. Now, notice a couple of things about this particular definition. It isn't a chaotic process, right? It's a very orderly process. It's an investigative process. It's curious, right? And it's around creativity for the purpose of developing new knowledge, right? So you might have a question about, so how does employee engagement drive customer service in the hospitality industry, right? Maybe we don't have the answers for that question yet. You may want to create that knowledge, or for your particular organization, you want to focus on the role of diversity and mentoring as it applies to the financial banking industry, or as it applies to a church or to a nonprofit, or whatever the context might be, right? But the idea is that this process isn't chaotic. It's not something that happens haphazardly or without forethought, but rather is quite orderly and is used for the purpose of creating something. Now that's the exciting piece here, right? Is that we're not doing research for the sake of doing research, but you're literally generating something brand new that we don't know yet. And that is so exciting about research. When you find something, when you're looking at data or you're looking at information and you're the first person to begin to connect those dots and those light bulbs begin to go off, it's an amazing, amazing feeling. Of course, there's this idea, this kind of juxtaposition around basic versus applied research and scientific versus practical. I'll let you dig into the text around those things, but know that that there are these kinds of different research. We'll talk a little bit later on about the lens that we're going to specifically use. So, when we think about the idea of scholarly practice, and we introduced this last week when I had you read, or when I pulled up Catherine's article in class. Remember, our class is centered around the idea of evidence-based, right? And so an evidence-based approach to that research practice is this, and I love this word, don't miss this word, an unrelenting commitment. Unrelenting, right? We're going to turn over every rock we can. Unrelenting commitment to gather facts and information necessary to make informed and intelligent decisions. Now, I don't know any organization, whether that's a for-profit, a non-profit, a startup, a family-owned, a large, small, medium-sized business that isn't interested in making informed and intelligent decisions. But notice it comes with some discipline, right? It comes with an unrelenting commitment to not gather opinions or to gather anecdotes, but rather to gather facts and information. And there are some scholarly practice interventions or imperatives, right? If you look further down in Dr. Lombardozzi's article, you'll notice these 10 kind of scholarly practice imperatives. I want you to know kind of what those are and how they resonate with you. As you read through them, what are the imperatives that speak to you a little bit? What are the things that kind of click within your own mind and say, yeah, I really do relate to that, right? If we move this idea forward and we apply the idea of Dr. Lombardozzi's smart practice principles, and we think about the idea of research and its nature as an unrelenting commitment, I think it's very important that we ground this idea in the real world, right? And so, if we think about your own projects and the own questions that you have, what drives organizational research? Well, it's the problems that we face, right, or that your organization faces, right? It's quite literally the things that trouble us, right? So I'm having trouble with this. How do I find more information? And I shared some stories in last week's class around even my own work inside an organization and how they came to us with questions. It's the questions that we have, and most importantly, connected to that is that we need answers to, right? And I love this quote in our Swanson and Holton text, this idea that as human-made entities, organizations engage in all kinds of phenomena. And I think that's very true. Think about the places where you work and you spend your time. There, there are people all around. And it's the people that make up the organization. And because of that, organizations engage in all kinds of unique phenomena, right? We must, however, ground our problems and questions in reality. It must be applied. And we have to think of it around this particular question. What is known about this, and is it important? So, as we consider the idea of research and its application in the context of our class, we might ask that, what do we know about this, and is it important? The way that we might find that information out is we conduct a lit review. We at least go and find out, all right, what do we know about this? And then we might observe or interview or survey or look at individual experiences and begin to gain, remember, facts and information that lead to a sense of evidence-based practice, intelligent decision making, right? So let's move this idea forward. So let's brainstorm for a minute and think about a problem or an opportunity, right? Because research isn't just about the things that plague us. It's not just about the things that are wrong. But it could be about an opportunity that is happening that you want to be able to take advantage of. So I want you to think for a minute. Think of a problem or an opportunity that is happening in your workplace or your life that is as of yet unresolved. Some of you already have this, right? You already know what it's going to be. Well, my HR department's not working very well, so I like to. That's an opportunity for us to really kind of leverage the future, right? Our employee engagement scores are way down. Our strategic HR is not fitting well. Our training and development isn't working so well. We need more leadership development opportunities to really take our company to the next level. Or we have some time management issues or whatever that might be, but something that is yet unresolved. And I want you to get specific with it. So when you say, We need more leadership training. What do you mean? What is or are the core issues around that? What questions do you have? And what would you want to know about that problem or opportunity? What specifically would you want to know? These are four really important guiding questions. So, can you take that problem or opportunity and be very specific with it? Can you name the core issues? Can you talk very specifically about the questions that you have? And what would you want to know about that problem or opportunity? All right. So let's as we move forward, let's take these four questions kind of with us as we think about it. Now, as we begin the process, so here we are. We've thought about research. We've connected it to Dr. Lombardozzi's article. We've gotten into our text already. We've thought about these problems and this applied nature. All right, well, how do we begin the process? Well, there are a couple of ways to do that. There is this scientific approach. You guys are very familiar with this. This is a very well-grounded scientific method, right? It's very formal. It's hypothesis-driven. It's hypothesis testing. There's this. It's very controlled. It's clear. It's measurable. It's very objective. There's these variables and outcomes and things, and it quite frankly can feel kind of cold, right? But it's a very scientific process. All right, so that's one process. All right, well, what's another process, right? Well, there's this practitioner approach, right? And practitioner approach would say that, well, you just draw on experience and observations, you work from a model and you develop hypotheses or guesses from that. You might review the literature as kind of anecdotal, and your hypotheses are grounded in reality, and then you network with others through this sense of expertise. All right, now let's talk a little bit about this, because on one hand, we have this scientific approach, and on the other hand, we have this practitioner approach, and let's be really clear about something, that these two camps, they don't get along very well. Okay, so the practitioner community would say, who reads all of those journal articles anyway? I mean, it's so cold and disconnected, and it's not possible for researchers and scientists to have any idea of what it's like to work here, right? And on one hand, they might be right about that, right? But on the other side, the science community would say, oh, that practitioner work is garbage, right? Wow, who would do any of the things that practitioners would just kind of come up with on the whim? It's the new flavor of the month, right? And so these communities, they don't really get along all that well. And that's a problem, because we need science, we need control, we need a sense of order and orderliness in terms of how we solve our problems, but we also need them to be very grounded in reality, right? And so we have to find a way. We have to find a way to bring these kinds of things together. And the way we do that is through the scholar practitioner approach. So let's turn our attention there for just a minute. So as we turn our attention, this idea of a scientist practitioner approach is how we might best approach our own research. And here's where these kinds of things collide. It draws on the scientific method of investigation. And when you see that, read orderly, right? But it also draws on past experience and the current state. So when you read that, hear practitioner, but it strives for this idea of applied research, which is so important. It is objective and scientific and creative. We are called on to be ethical and to manage and to gather data and to do all of these different roles, right? But this method takes the best of both worlds and blends them together. It looks a little bit like this, right? That we've got all of the benefits of the scientific method on one side, all of the benefits of the practitioner method on the other side, and then in the middle we've got the best of both worlds. Now, so this is just kind of a visual depiction of what that might look like, but I would wonder for you, where do you find yourself on this Venn diagram? Do you find yourself leaning way more toward the left of the practitioner model, or way more toward the right to the scientific model? Or do you find yourself kind of in the middle? Where for you is the most comfortable? Where do you feel most at home? That's going to be important for us to know as we move forward and we begin to work toward finding solutions to your organizational issues. Now, let's connect this very specifically to the hat for a minute. I want you to think about, remember, in a couple of slides ago, I asked you to think about, all right, what can you be specific about a problem? Can you name, what do we know, what do we don't know? So I want you to think about the organizational problem or challenge that we talked about earlier. And note that the hat asks for two very specific pieces of information: a literature review, a review of the literature around a particular problem, and then a proposal for examining that problem. So we're going to be blending the scientist practitioner model, which is talked about within our text, and the smart practice guidelines that Dr. Bardozzi gave to us in the scholarly practice article. Okay, so we're going to be taking those models and putting them together, and noting that the hat asks for a literature review and a proposal for examining the problem. All right. Now, remember this. I'm just going to come back to this and just tie a bow on this for a minute. We are going to be involved in an unrelenting commitment to gather facts. So we're going to be in the action of gathering information. And when we gather that information, we're going to use that information to make informed and intelligent decisions regarding the problems or the opportunities that you're going to name in your hat projects. All right. We're going to use those guidelines that Catherine talks about in her article, as well as the methods and techniques that our text begins to talk about. All right, and this will unfold as we go throughout our class. Now, for our hat, and we'll talk about this next week a little bit, but for our hat for this week, I want you to begin to consider topical ideas that you might focus on for your semester project. Specifically, here's what I would want to know. What is the general topic that you're interested in, right? Is it leadership? Is it diversity? Is it mentoring? Is it strategic planning? Is it, as I mentioned, time management? Is it supply chain? Is it growth? Is it entrepreneur? What might it be? What's the general topic that you're interested in? How do you know that it's a challenge or opportunity? So I'd like for you to think about and name that. How do you know that something is actually a challenge or an opportunity? What experience? I want you to think through that. What experience do you have with this topic? What do you know about it already? And initially, just off the top of your head, just coming from a scientist practitioner perspective, how might you explore that topic fully? I want you to kind of begin to think through some of those questions, and we'll talk about them next week in our class and begin to kind of dig into this a little bit. All right, now, if I were you, I would want to know. All right, so I'm pumped about this. Now I can't wait. So I'm really going to dig into this topic that I get to focus on for the entire semester. Where do I find the information? Where do I find this stuff at? Right? How do I find support for my specific question? Well, that's next week, right? So next week we're gonna take a look at the library system and how we kind of dig in. Now that may sound very boring to you, but I'm telling you right now, this is going to open up some eyes. You're going to be like, I had no idea it was this easy to do, right? And so we're going to be digging into that next week. Now, make sure that you have taken a look at the APA modules on our Blackboard shell. Make sure to check those out, even if you're very, very comfortable with APA, as well as the writing and research resources that are also listed on our Blackboard shell. And if you have any questions, make sure that you shoot me a note so that I can be as helpful as possible for you. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and begin to wrap up this week's class. This is plenty of content for you to think about over the course of the next week or so. Remember that next week we are back in synchronously, and we're going to be thinking about and talking about some of the questions that we brought up today. So I do want you to spend some time thinking about and narrowing down a potential hat topic for yourself, okay? What are you interested in? What do you want to know more about? What could you really kind of dig into that you want more answers about, all right? And that's going to be really helpful so that when we get into the library and we start looking at research, you can immediately kind of dive into that, all right? I know we talked about it previously, but get into those APA modules, get into those resources that are on our Blackboard shell, because you're going to find that they're going to be really very valuable for you. It's very valuable information. It is always a pleasure to spend time with you. I hope this has been helpful, informative. I cannot wait until we meet again next week, and we'll dig into this some more. All right, guys, stay tuned to the Blackboard shell. Stay tuned to the announcements. Stay tuned to the discussion boards. Let's get on this, all right? Have a great day, everybody. Take care.